G'day YouTube, Cracker John here. Today I have Alan with me to discuss the electronic control unit on the Vulcan S. G'day Alan.
G'day John.
Alan is a subscriber of the channel, a regular on live stream and a regular in the chat videos on my channel, and Alan lives in Michigan, USA. Okay Alan, how did motorcycles develop to the ECU?
Yeah, you and I talked about it. That's a good question, and it kind of goes back probably 50 years. A lot of things happened in 5 decades, but anyway, as I think I mentioned in one other video, the first ECU that was used by any motorcycle manufacturer was Kawasaki in 1980, and that was their KZ1000. The motorcycle manufacturers, Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Honda, all realized that a lot of the laws being passed in America were going to affect emissions. And so they went to the ECU for a variety of reasons, because back in the old days, everything was just carburetors. One of the things that you did was there was carburetors and points. That's what you had. That's what determined the spark and whatnot, and the air fuel mixtures into the engine. And even before, say, 69, you had to kickstart all of your motorcycles. That's just the way you started them. That was the day. One of the things that Honda brought to the picture was, I think it was 69, when they brought in the CB 750, that had electric start. Oh my goodness, that was something. So everybody started putting electric starts on them. And with the emission controls through the 70s, definitely into the 80s, motorcycles started going that route. It was easier to maintain kind of the carburetors and the point systems, but they would fall out of tune. They'd start pumping out a lot of different emissions, the hydrocarbons, the nitrous oxides, the carbon monoxide. So they got rid of all that and they went to the ECUs, and that's how we got where we're at today. And today there may be a few motorcycles still sold with carburetors, but it's generally a very, very small percentage.
Did they start the ECUs in cars first and then motorbikes?
I would say they started experimenting with ECUs, if you will, back in the mid 70s here in I was in California at the time, and then even then, they started to try and put electronics on a carburetor. I remember my dad's old 1980 Oldsmobile had an electronic carburetor, an actual carburetor that they put little computer controls on there for idling and other stuff. A lot of the stuff that they tried to do was all based on some very simple electronics and vacuum systems to retard timing on the distributors and do other things. The motorcycles really weren't impacted until the 80s themselves. That's when they started really becoming more pronounced with their emission controls and whatnot. And then as the technology grew, so did the ECU. As it became more reliable. In the old days, they were very susceptible to heat and that kind of thing, vibrations. Now, today, if you look at your laptops, you look at your cell phone, that's just a printed circuit board on the inside, and they're pretty robust. So they've come a long, long ways in 50 years.
Okay, Alan, so what is the ECU?
Well, that's the good question, right? I mean, what the ECU basically does is it's watching, it's the brain of the motorcycle, and it's monitoring a lot of things, specifically the engine, but it's also monitoring your ABS system if you have that, your lights, your electrical system, that kind of thing. But the main portion of it is monitoring the engine. And what it's trying to do, and I have some notes here, but what it's trying to do is make sure that the air fuel mixture is correct. It's controlling that. It's also controlling the ignition timing, making sure that depending on where your throttle is, because it's actually it knows the throttle position. Some new motorcycles are actually throttled by wire. There's no cables or anything. It's just all throttled by electronics. But it's monitoring that throttle position. It's monitoring the RPMs. It's monitoring the speed, and it's trying to make sure that all of that, the timing and the air fuel mixtures are correct. It's also monitoring the oil pressure, oil temperatures, the air inlet temperatures, and the big part on the closed loop system, it's monitoring your O2 sensor. So it's actually feeding air, it's allowing air to be fed in at a certain ratio to the fuel. It's timing it so that based on throttle and speed, it's timing it so that it's sparking at the right point. And then that goes out the exhaust, and then it's reading whatever those components are in the exhaust system, and then making microsecond adjustments all the time. And so that's basically what the ECU does. And the good news is you'll actually get better metering of the fuel and the air. You get good throttle response. It's more responsive. So those are the positive parts of that. You don't have to. It's basically you set it and forget it. You don't have to mess with any of that because the ECU is controlling it. The disadvantages, obviously, the ECUs are expensive, and they can be difficult to work on or figure out if your Vulcan S or any motorcycle's throwing engine codes. Just like with cars, you'll get that little orange light. It'll tell you that something's not right within the system. Now you have to start discerning what that is, and it could be a myriad. One code doesn't necessarily mean one thing. One code could be a potential of a list of things that are going awry within the engine. So those are some of the disadvantages, if you will.
So the ECU is a computer, isn't it? And it's got a circuit board.
That's correct. You have a picture of that, and if you look at the ECU board, the picture is a generic picture, but it just looks like a printed circuit board, much like what you would see in a desktop or a laptop. It's like the motherboard, your sound card, your video card. It's designed such to handle just certain parameters. There's transistors, capacitors, and other things. They're all soldered in place, and it's pretty, if you will, basic from an electronic standpoint. So that's the ECU generic looking thing. There's also a picture of the Kawasaki ECU. When you look at that, you'll see that it's roughly, I'm going to say about 5 inches across and 4 inches, and maybe a half an inch thick. Has 2 plug-ins. So the plug-ins are basically, I couldn't find a good wiring diagram, but one plug-in is kind of monitoring all the electrical stuff, ABS brakes, lights, voltage, all that. But the other part's monitoring all the engine pieces. And that ECU is, as you're looking at the motorcycle, if you're sitting on it, it's just in front of the front portion of the seat, right in just below that. You're basically sitting on the Vulcan S. You're sitting on the battery area. Just in front of that is the ECU. And if you want to draw a line, if you're looking at it from the side, you want to draw a line up from the O2 sensor up, it's in that area. And what it is if to get to it, you actually have to remove the tank. The tank, there's a bunch of plastic pieces that got to come off, and the rider seat. And 3 bolts, you lift the tank up a little bit, and you will see the ECU. And that ECU has got a little screw on it, 2 plugs, and it's out. So taking it out, looking at it, it's kind of placed in a little well, if you will. It's been injection molded because the entire intake system, the air filter and the rest is this huge plastic piece that sits underneath the tank, and the ECU sits to the rear of that. So That's that portion. Now, what Kawasaki will tell you is that their ECU, and I didn't know this, but I found out later, their ECU is actually programmable. I'll use the dreaded air quotes, programmable. So you can, if you want, buy a programmable device from Kawasaki. It's pretty pricey. It's about $700, but that's American, and you can program it. Now, what you can do with that device, that programmable device, you can go to the Kawasaki website and look it up, but it'll allow you a richer fuel setting, about 5%. It'll allow you leaner fuel settings. It'll advance your ignition from stock. It'll retard the ignition from stock. And then they talk about hard riding surfaces, setting ignition retard and fueling richer, soft riding surfaces. I'm not sure what they're talking about there. You can even plug in a beginner engine setting, believe it or not. And what that does is it retards everything. It'll suppress it. It'll actually keep the engine from going beyond a certain RPM. And allowing you to go at certain speeds if you're a beginner. I know in some countries, because I've seen videos of that, when they do I forget what you had told me, but they actually restrict how fast or the RPMs of the motorcycle. What they do is they put a little clip on the throttle inside the carburetor, or not the carburetor, but inside where the air inlets are, so that you can't, no matter what you do, it doesn't allow you to get full throttle cable opening. So you cannot overspeed the engine or go at high speeds. So there's a lot of videos online that show you how to take those off. If they really mandated it, they could retard all of that stuff through the ECU. Then only then somebody that knows how to turn it off can do it. They do the same thing with cars. I didn't know if people knew that or not, but they limit cars with speed, unless specifically designed that way. Most cars are limited to about 105, 110 miles an hour. You can mash the throttle all the way to the floor, but that's as fast as you're going to go. I found that out on my truck. Again, all through the ECU, and you can take those out. Motorcycles are no different, so you can do some stuff to them if you got the right. Now, there are people that have bought those Kawasaki programmable things, or they've been toying around with some of the programming of the ECU. And what they'll do is, maybe as a hobby or whatever, they do this, and they do some of this reprogramming of your ECU. That's sketchy at best. I'd be very wary, nervous about allowing somebody to do that. There is a group called, I think it was ECU Unlimited. They're in California, and they actually will tune your ECU. So if you're in that mode, you can take the ECU out of your Vulcan S, send it to them. They'll reprogram it and then send it back to you. I don't. The forums say that these people really do good work. I don't know personally whether I would do that or not, but if you want more horsepower, that's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to actually take it to some place that actually dynos the motorcycle, whichever motorcycle, but on the Vulcan S, and they run it up through the RPMs, through the shift gears. They'll get a power to weight and power air fuel ratios and all kinds of other things through the gears, and then they actually flash the BIOS, because as you remember with that circuit board, there's a BIOS in there, basic input output system, that tells the fuel injectors and the rest of it based on throttle and the rest where they should be, timing and the rest. They can change all of that and get you more horsepower out of the engine if that's what you want. And there are some aftermarket, like I think it's called the Power Commander 4. You plug that in, and then you do some dynoing and some testing, and you can extract more horsepower out of any motorcycle because of the ECU. Back in the old days, you couldn't do that. You had to increase the compression ratio, change the cams, possibly get bigger carburetor, do other things, get horsepower out of the motorcycle. In today's world, you just kind of fool around electronically with the ECU because it's going to change all those parameters and make the bike more powerful or make the engine more powerful, if that's what you want to do. What the ECU does on a stock one gives you great gas mileage, gives you good throttle response. It's basically for the masses, and I would say 80% of the people, maybe 90% of the people, are happy with all of that. I'm definitely happy with the performance of my Vulcan S. I'm thinking you're pretty happy with your bike, John.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You know, one simple way of doing it, obviously, is, as you found out, and as you had mentioned to me, just change the exhaust system. You said that after you put that Mazzari on, you felt a lot more horsepower,
Yeah.
or seemed more in the seat of the pants type power on the motorcycle. So, it gets back to the other discussion we had where you're just, making the engine breathe a lot easier. And when it breathes a lot easier, the ECU will then allow more air and fuel in, and so you get more power by definition. So that's just kind of how all that works.
Yeah, when I put the Mazzari exhaust on and rode the bike for the first time, I opened up the throttle and I thought it was going to do a wheelie.
Yeah, I mean, you had mentioned that to me, and I didn't, for mine, because I had changed mine so early. I only had maybe 50 miles on the bike, so I didn't see that kind of, or didn't feel that kind of performance. But for everything you've said, and from what I've seen on YouTube and stuff, there's people that actually feel a little more power to the bike, and that's, like I said, it's just because the ECU is within the parameters that are stock, is allowing more air and fuel because it's breathing easier, and because of the more air and fuel, you're making more power. I mean, that's just simple. That's just simple physics.
Okay, Alan. Last question. How important is the ECU in the functioning of a motorbike?
It's like I said, it's the brains. As we've talked about before, if you want to get more power out of it, you can do that. If you want to take power away from the motorcycle because you're a new rider or whatever, then you can do that. The ECU is the whole thing. The bike will not run without it. It just won't. If you unplug any of those sensors, whether it's the oil temperature or the air inlet or the O2 sensor, it may not even start. And if it does start, you're immediately going to get a check engine light up on the dash there, on the little instrument board. You'll get that little orange light that we're all familiar with, that something's wrong, that you need. And then what Kawasaki will tell you is take it immediately to an authorized Kawasaki dealer. Yeah, okay. So, if you know what you did, then you just undo it. But if you're riding and all of a sudden that check engine light comes on, it means that something is not right, or at least the ECU thinks that there's not something right within the engine. Whether it's an oil, you'll get an oil pressure light, but maybe your air inlet temperature plug, maybe the O2 sensor, there may be something else going on. And so the ECU is not able to efficiently control the whole process of the engine and the horsepower. That's what's happening. So without it, you're done. Should you change it? That's kind of up to you. Me personally, if you want a lot of power, maybe go buy one of those 1300 cc KC, Ninja bikes that do 180 miles an hour if you want that kind of power. I know there's people that use the Vulcan S as a transitional bike. So they've had a smaller bike, they've moved to the Vulcan S as a step up, and they like that. Then they get bored with it, and so they want more power, so they go to other motorcycles for the power or whatever. That's all within the personal choice of people, but that's how important the ECU is with regard to the engine and its operating conditions.
Well, thanks very much, Alan, for the information. And I know you do a lot of background research for these chat videos, so thank you very much.
No, that's my pleasure. And the whole point is to try and help people here. If you've got a Vulcan S and you're looking at different things for the bike, there's a lot of accessories. We'll probably, you and I have talked about maybe doing some more videos about those, but a lot of accessories out there. There's ways of extracting more power out of them. You know, it's just, it's a very good, you know, if you will, a mid-range motorcycle. It's at 650 cc's. It's got plenty of power, good gas mileage, and you can modify it if you choose to do that with aftermarket exhaust, messing with the ECU, just other things. So I'm just trying to help folks out. That's it. And thanks for letting me do that.
No worries. Now, if you, the viewer, would like Alan to discuss any particular subject about the Vulcan S, leave a comment under the video and Alan will look into it. See you, mate.
Well, let me, if I can make one more last comment. I do have a service manual. I don't know how many people have a service manual, but I do have one. So if people have some specific questions that's not in the owner's manual and they can't find online, let me know. John will let me know through the YouTube. I can get you that information through the service manual and help you out in that way. So we'll just go from there.
No worries. See you, mate.
Thanks, man. Be good.
Thanks for watching my video. If you enjoy my videos, subscribe to the channel. The Quacker John Vulcan S show is on every Friday night at 10 p.m. Brisbane, Australia time. You are most welcome to join in. You are most welcome to join the Quacker John chat room. And the link for your invitation to join the chat room is in the comments under the video. I have published a book called My Kawasaki Vulcan SE Adventures, and it is available on the Amazon website. See ya!